We hear about artificial intelligence improving processes of detecting viruses, business automation, or even destroying a lot of the jobs that we have now. But where are we in the evolution of this technology? Hi, I'm Takatoshi Shibayama, host of the Future Design Podcast. I run a blockchain solutions company, but I'm also searching for ideas and new technologies that can improve our lives. Today we have Shalika Verma. She's a technologist that works as a director, partner technology of Microsoft. She dives into matters of technology that deals with philosophy and spirituality. She talks to us about the current state of AI, the problem with AI, and how AI can integrate with our businesses and our everyday lives. So stick around to the end. So AI has been really a big topic amongst businesses and even very curious people in the world now. But what we don't really understand as a general public is where we are in AI. Now, there's a lot of talk about general AI and then very specific AI that can be used for business purposes. And both of them seem to be moving at very fast speeds, but the state that we're in, it seems like we're racing against sci-fi rather than actually looking at the reality. So can you give us a little bit of an insight on where we are with the specific AI?
Yeah, sure, Taka. General AI is a very different topic. It is about saying that like a human brain, can I have a machine which can interpret all and one in with probably a single universal model or an engine that we build, and we are miles away from that at this stage. Now, coming back to what is happening currently in the industry, uh, we we are we are calling this an AI proliferation right now, but it is really a very narrow AI, and that is also in very specific areas within AI. So, in larger term is AI. Within that, you have got something called as machine learning, where you are writing different kind of algorithms to let the machine learn certain things on its own. Within that, a subclass is called as artificial neural networks, and most of the development that you see today is either in these artificial neural networks, which is ANN, which is augmented by some capabilities in the machine learning, like decision trees or nearest neighbors, or stuff like that. So I think that's where most of the development is happening right now. None of these are newly identified techniques. They have been available for a lot of years now, in research, in development, has tested early success right from 1960s, 70s, right? The only reason I feel that they are so much universal, becoming so much universal right now, are two, three factors. First and fundamental factor is mathematical techniques and the artificial neural network is data hungry. We have created that data in past couple of decades. So we are at a stage to consume them. Second is they are also compute hungry, and we now have machines capable of training, even with GPU help or the cheaper cores, etc. We now have the machine power capable of running those algorithms and consume that kind of data. Third, I think is sometimes underestimated, but one of the prolific propagator of this technology is the cloud adoption, because this has reduced the barrier to entry for a lot of innovators because of its OPEX consumption model. So I think those are the factors which really gave boost to the development of ANN and machine learning into AI in the current state that we see now. However, for general AI, a lot of other techniques also have to get improved and matured, and that's something that is years away for us.
Yeah, it's very interesting that in now, because of the boost of the internet, and we all have digital footprints, that it's much easier to gather information about where people shop or where we talk about on social media, etc. And you can collate all those information and feed it to the supercomputers now compared to what they were in 1950s and 60s, and feed that data into those computers and make it analyze those data. And I think that's simply what it is, right? It's not actual artificial intelligence. It is actually data
Absolutely.
analysis. It's just a very sexy word that they use for this particular solution that you're talking about. And so the next question comes where people are very worried about, oh, is AI going to take my job? And that's been talked about way too much, and it's probably been covered so much already, and it might not be a very interesting topic, but it is a very big concern for a lot of people. Now, where is the development of AI now that is getting to a level where they can replace certain jobs that we find available today?
So that will happen. I mean, I'm just going to give a very honest perspective here. Any technical advancement uh, which brings in automation to an extent takes away certain jobs from industry. At the same time, it ends up creating certain jobs. So I believe that the advancement of AI will transform some professions, make some professions redundant, will add a lot more intelligence and demand to some other professions. Uh, just the right way to look at it, according to me, is just try to assume a healthcare professional, maybe a doctor. AI will give each doctor a way to become expert in the field rather than having a tiers of some doctors okay average and then you have got experts for really complex problems, right? So you it can it can amplify the ability at an individual level, but at the same time it can take down the total demand for the number of professionals required to do the job. So the right way of looking at this from the professional perspective, from the upcoming tech talent perspective, is to identify the areas where the jobs will increase, where there will be need to add more transformation, and then shift your skills towards those areas so that we augment the overall job market. I think that should be the right approach.
Yeah, I think that it's a matter of speed. So how quickly can AI technology evolve so that people have time to actually find a replacement for those jobs that they lost? And that's kind of the question I wanted to really get at is where are we? Where in the advancement are we so that we actually need to fear for it? I'll give you an example, which has nothing to do with AI, but I did a research before and I found out that from 2003 to 2013, accounting software has actually decimated accountants in certain companies, and they slashed about 40% of accountants that were hired. And that shows in 10 years, 1 decade, that 40% of that workforce that are called accountants in companies were disappeared. So are we that close to being like 10 years? Is it going to be 20 years, or even is it going to be 5 years? We don't really have an idea because we're always constantly talking about it's going to replace our jobs. It's going to replace our jobs.
It, I don't think it's a technical problem, right? So, like for example, if you look at what COVID did to a lot of digital transformation projects, I know of customers who have been talking about 2 years, 3 years timeline to achieve certain goals in terms of digital transformation in their organization. They did this in 2 months now because they were pushed to it. They were forced to go remote, forced to work from anywhere, right? Now, so was technology ever a bottleneck for them to get there? No. It was the process, culture, the will of the business itself, and where they saw their market value coming from, right? So I think projecting is not going to be easy, giving you a future number, future years. Technically, I think we are ready right now to look at automation into uh, healthcare, automation into finance industry, robo advising, wealth management, trading. We are all ready. The technology is there. Uh, but the processes, the culture has to change. We have to gain enough trust. So there is always going to be a mark, a shifting point, and events like this, which happen now, like pandemic, right? Events like this reset the reality for us. So instead of looking at whether I'm going to have this job after 5 years or 7 years, the right approach would be uh, what should I start developing now so that when the future jobs are available, I am actually ready to sort of grab them and be successful as a professional. I think that's where we need to spend the energy rather than worrying too much about what time in the future am I projecting myself.
I remember back in the 1950s, not that I was born then, I read about it, but there were two labs in Stanford that were actually experimenting on AI. One was to, I guess, replace humans, and then one was to augment humans. And now that we're looking at the former side of it, that I think that's, as you said, is far away from now. But in the latter part where we're trying to augment ourselves, it shouldn't really replace us. It should really help us to do better work in the office,
Absolutely.
or even during this pandemic. I guess we can think about how AI can be incorporated into our lives so that we can avoid these quarantine lockdowns and we can avoid the huge spread of pandemics. And I've been talking to people in the smart cities as well, and I've been asking them how are we advanced in this AI, and they tell me, yeah, we have sensors and we can find people who are clustered in certain areas so that we can advise them to spread out. But it seems like that's the only extent that I really heard. And to go beyond that, maybe it's not, we don't have the data sets enough to really feed these supercomputers to do what we call AI.
Yeah, I mean, pandemic is a very, very specific situation. I mean, I have been doing some reading on where we are from that perspective. So, if you remember back in January, the Blue Dot and even Google's Health Map both had sort of uh, warned that they are seeing increased number of pneumonia cases in December in a specific location in China. But we didn't act on it because we did not take AI so seriously, because we don't trust it inherently. And we don't trust it because we don't have a uniform mechanism of collecting universal health related data. So I think as an aftermath of this pandemic, I believe that the world organizations, along with different countries, will come together to define a standard in which the public information of health, which can help in this kind of pandemic projection, etc., will get published regularly as a data source which can be trusted by different AI models. And then we would be in a situation to, so it's not uh, really a problem of whether the model was available or whether the data was available, but it's again which we discussed before we starting this sort of discussion right now podcast is the trust part, right? Can I trust? Can I trust enough to take an action based on the insight that the model is giving me? And for that, lot of governance need to be at place. Now, within COVID, there are different steps, right? One is identification of pandemic in itself and projecting it in time, uh, which there was seemingly an attempt, but we couldn't trust it. Second is, can it help in finding a cure or a treatment? Now, the answer is it may augment some of the efforts. Like if you want to scan the number of patients with different treatments and say which treatments are working out rather than doing it manually, ingesting that data if it is faithfully available via an AI engine seems much more logical. Uh, but is AI going to be the main engine of finding a cure at this stage? I think the answer is going to be no. We are going to be trusting our traditional methods of finding out a treatment and finding out a vaccine much more. But the shortcomings of AI that we are identifying right now in the process will take us long way in the maturity of AI into healthcare. Now there are other peripheral things that AI seems to be helping, like for example, controlling. It's not exactly AI. I would say it is robotic automation, but disinfecting large premises via drones or providing monitoring coverage for the healthcare staff, right? So those are the things which sort of can reduce the exposure and threat to human life, are also good technical usage within the pandemic. And I think a lot of people are working on that. And the last one is actually deals with us who are sort of the end um, experienced users of the pandemic, right? We are sitting at home now. Can our work be enabled better? Can we get better analytics? Can somebody track my health? Can some assistant is going to track my stress exposure, right? Can my stay at home be made more fun? All of these things, I think AI will is helping a big way, because this is more like less difficult or less uh, life impacting or money impacting work. And I think that proliferation is huge, which is also good because it uh, trains people to rely on technology, which can be further leveraged during the next cycle of similar calamity whenever it hits us, right? So that's really my take on how this is panning out in the COVID world.
Yeah, technology has something that we needed to upskill really quickly during this time, hasn't it?
Yeah,
Even
yeah.
for me, like editing videos, it was something that was completely foreign to me. Now I do it almost on a daily basis. So, these things that you have to be, grabbing that and consuming it very quickly because everybody's going to be learning something new these days, right? What I thought was very interesting when you mentioned about Blue Dot, I actually knew about that too. And interesting, they actually scavenged across global airline reservation data, and then they understood where the people from Wuhan will be traveling. So they detected that they will be going to Seoul, Taipei, Singapore, Tokyo. And thing is, like, I was thinking, why didn't they alarm all these governments that these data were actually collected and they actually knew where they're going? But we never heard anything from that company. Maybe because they weren't hired by governments. But I think that sometimes that is as a problem is that that the right technology is not in the right hands.
Yeah, so just one point and one anecdote even I would share is I think in 2008 to 12, 13, there was a Google project to track influenza. And initially, 2, 3 years, they were actually very accurate. And then those numbers were not so accurate. And later on, they figured out that the numbers were not so accurate because people got used to searching the flu projections or flu outbreaks using the tool, and the tool was using the search itself as an indication of social media message that there was an outbreak. So I think it sort of got into, so yeah, this is something that we need to sort of look out for on how our models are interpreting what they are interpreting.
Yeah. And also, I heard that company didn't use any social media data for detecting any of this pandemic. So I wanted to ask you about that. So is there a difference in quality of data? So, there obviously global airline reservation is hard data that people are traveling, but they say that social media data is not that quality because it's just chit chat and it's just noise. So can you define us clearly that what kind of data is actually real hard data that you can actually scientifically use?
It depends on the purpose. So you have to really look at the scenario that you are trying to identify. And then, like for example, if you are trying to understand your customer sentiment about a service or a phone service that you are providing in a particular location, um, social media data probably becomes very useful in those scenarios because people tend to express themselves more freely on those channels. But data like health, or who is seeing what kind of infections. You don't really get that thorough and qualitative information out of social media on those, right? So you rather look at uniform published data, not even the data published by some smaller NGOs or something, but something that is vetted by the government. And hence, I was talking to you about the standards, right? Like the financial data via the open API, open banking APIs, right? So you should have similar standard for health, similar standard for manufacturing, right? So if you have got those standards in place in which the authentic business data can be published and exchanged, and the governance around what can be exchanged and how should be used, I think you have a better chance of creating good business AI applications. But for the consumer applications, like what is the trend of fashion, or what's my sentiment about my operator or a particular show, TV show. I think social media is also a good channel because that's where you get to hear the truth.
Interesting, interesting. And you touched upon health data quite a few times. Now, it's because we're in this pandemic that you're quite excited about the topic, or I think there's a real use for our data to be used in healthcare. But at the same time, there's a worry that why is my health data always been recorded by somebody and being handed out to a government or handed out to a for-profit company? And is my data going to be manipulated or sold out, monetized in some way that is completely foreign to me? So that's another question that maybe a lot of people are worried about is smart cities, healthcare data, AI, all these things is a bit of an intrusion to our privacy. So, as a person that you're working on AI, what do you have to say about these people who have privacy concerns?
So again, I'm going to the same broader umbrella, which is called trust, right? So for any individual to share any personal data with anyone, we have to be very clear on how that data will be used. What is my right? How do I ask the data to be forgotten if I want to do that? So the control of the data should be in the originator of the data, should be with the originator of the data. So the standards and policies that I'm talking about, they will exactly establish this. They will tell you how your data will be used, who will use the data, what fields of this data would be shared with whom, and what is the process for you to get forgotten in the respective systems, in the respective levels of details, right? Now, if this is all documented, governed, and there are practices around that, it's very easy for an individual to share the data because there is a benefit in sharing, and then there is a trust and privacy issue in sharing, right? So as long as you are able to mitigate the risks and the concerns, the larger advantage can be achieved. So I think we will have to really get into the standards and policies to make sure that the individual comfort is built and people start trusting the process and the outcome, and then willingly share the information that can feed into that intelligence.
So you talk about trust in the AI, but actually, I need to go back to where I was saying is that we have to trust for-profit companies and governments to run our data, right? And with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and many more that we've seen before, our trust has been crushed every single time. So to get our trust back, it is going to take a lot of time to actually, really trust the government and say, here, have my data, have my health data records, have my social data records, have my financial data. I mean, that's a huge one to give out to somebody. So how can we restore trust in AI?
There is no shortcut to this, correct. We will have to do it the hard way. So probably, like for example, if I can look at India specific situation, right? I think there is a lot of data that is already with the government, like your tax information, uh, your regular wealth information. Right? So if government can start using some of that information and demonstrate that it can responsibly use that information to create some value for the citizens, I think the trust will start building up. Uh, it's always going to be a mechanism of asking for some more information rather than the whole lot, and demonstrate the value that I gain back by trading that information with a certain body. Um, but for even for that to happen, we first need the standardization, the governance mechanism, the agreement between various parties in place. So that's the first thing to work on, and I think there are a lot of governments who are discussing that. I think GDPR in Europe was a great step towards that, and I'm sure other governments will adopt similar guidelines in some form or other, which gives lot of control back to the owner of the data. and then sort of start building the services on top of what people are willing to trade. Also, the important thing is to look at is what you lose if you don't give. Like for example, if there is a health service, like in India, you actually have lot of people who are in need of medical care, who may not afford it, right? Now, for them, the loss of this information getting sold to a private body versus the government facilitating a medical care in hours of need, the benefit really outweighs uh, the disadvantage of having the data into for profit people. So you're always going to have this kind of tussle between what I gain out of it versus what I lose and where is the risk. As long as we are able to put the processes and practices in place to minimize the risk, to protect the privacy and make sure that the security is paramount, I think the adoption will slowly go up. It will take time, but it will surely go up.
Yeah. So I hope that companies can actually not hide all their terms and conditions and the disclaimer really, in deep down into their webpage and then bring it out a little bit more so that we can understand what kind of data privacy rules that they're doing. Governments, I understand because it's GDPR, they put it out in the public so everybody to know. Companies, they could really put it in the deep corners of their webpage. So that's one thing that I think we should think about. So next topic I really want to talk about is how AI is actually integrating with each other. So even in my business in blockchain, we always talk about interoperability about blockchain because there's so many different types of blockchain. How do they actually talk to each other? How do they integrate with each other? And I'm sure that AI also has its own unique problems with business integration because if one side is using AI and they want to feed that information into another system of their clients, if they can't do that, then there's no real purpose of doing it. So can you tell us a little bit more about how business integration is happening in the AI field?
Yes. Uh, so I'm just going to give you an example in the financial services sector, just as an example to put the problem in the context. So suppose we developed an AI model which takes a 360-degree view of a customer and say projects something like this customer is the probability of this customer taking a home loan is say 60%, and the probability of this customer taking a vehicle loan is say 80%. That's the kind of insight you will get out of an AI model. Now, for a financial institute to offer this to a customer at the right point, there are different mechanisms, right? One of them would be their campaign tool. So they may be running a marketing campaign where they just, push out SMSs or emails to the potential prospect customers. Now, it's not enough to generate this insight, but you need to have a mechanism to get this insight into that tool. Otherwise, you will end up telling your marketing team to use some other campaign system to use this AI insight, and for the rest of the work, the another campaign system. And we won't be able to drive that kind of adoption. So, because of the adoption, the insight will not get used. Another example is now it's not just the AI that is progressing in a bank. So you also have say a robo chat, right? So a chatbot who is doing a customer interaction. Now it's relatively easier to feed the AI information into chatbot because both are sort of the new applications and agile for you to manage. But now because your AI model said 60% chance home loan, 80% chance vehicle loan, but before the customer started talking to a chatbot, what if he spent 30 minutes browsing through your home loan site, right? So now you are in a situation where chatbot needs to override the decision that is coming from a machine learning and give a higher weightage to something else. So you need that intelligence also built in there. And what if the customer says yes to a home loan? If you tell that customer to come back tomorrow or whatever, you're going to lose him. So again, you need a mechanism so that the chatbot can actually invoke the loan management system and get the application filed in right there, which means that you need to have integration like facial recognition, authentication, KYC, loan management system. If you do all of this, your that little AI project is going to be sort of successful. If you don't do this, then it will remain a POC. And this is a challenge that I think every system integrator right now in the market is struggling with. Because tool by tool, you have to figure out a way to get into the system. Now, there is also another competitive war there because the tool provider themselves are trying to build AI models inbuilt into them. So, can you outperform their AI versus your AI model now? Versus, can you outperform the whole business process? Like, for example, in spite of you doing the entire AI, if your conversion rate after the offer is at, say, 40%, and without AI, if the marketing team themselves with their traditional wisdom was attaining an 38% of conversion, whether the effort is worth it, right? So I think there is lot of end-to-end business case ROI, end-to-end justification of what we try and achieve and how we define the success of a project. How does an end business process looks like? We have to discuss and decide all of that before jumping into any model development. I think that's the key.
Right. So it seems like we're kind of years off into getting every company's IT systems upgraded to that level that AI can really function across different platforms.
Oh, I am
So
very hopeful that COVID is pushing it through
yeah, actually,
because
I'm
people
hoping so too.
understand it. Yeah,
Each and
yeah,
each and
absolutely.
every individual level to the business level, I hope everybody's not cutting down on IT capex and trying to upgrade their systems during these times.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
I
thank
think
you.
there is a overall understanding that this needs to be the long term strategy and needs to become solid for them to survive next such calamity whenever that happens.
Yeah. Right. Well, that was really great insight. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully we can have a follow up of this because it's a very intriguing topic, and everybody really wants to know what's going on in AI. And you're probably the closest one that I know is in that industry. So, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Taka, for having me on your podcast, and definitely look forward to a follow up conversation.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked the show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.